Good news, everybody. DePape may have determined the next Speaker of the House because Pelosi says retirement decision will be affected by the attack on her husband. Before we begin, an article from The Hill via Yahoo News, written by weird spelling Michael Schnell, written yesterday at 3:14 p.m. Before we begin, please subscribe and give this video a like to help it get recommended in the algorithm. And here we go. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, in a new interview said the attack on her husband, Paul Pelosi, will affect the decision she makes of whether to retire from Congress should Democrats lose control of the House in Tuesday's midterm elections. That's today. Please go vote. And based on that paragraph alone, it sounds like Nancy either wants to be in charge or she doesn't want to play the game. And that's a sore loser. I have to say my decision will be affected about what happened the last week or two, Pelosi told CNN's Anderson Cooper. Operation Mockingbird Asset. In her first sit-down interview since the attack on her husband, pressed further on if her decision will be impacted by the attack, Pelosi told Cooper, yes. Pelosi's full interview with CNN is scheduled to air at 8 p.m. on Anderson Cooper 360. Pelosi's comments come less than 2 weeks after her husband, 82, was injured during a break-in, because when glass shatters on the outside of the door, that's a break-in, at the couple's San Francisco home. Authorities allege that David DePape, 42, who was illegally in the U.S., I think it might have been expired visa, broke into the residence through a glass door in the early hours of October 28, threatened to hold the speaker hostage and hit Paul Pelosi over the head with a hammer. The Nancy Pelosi was in Washington at the time. The Nancy Pelosi. Wow. So, they're alleging, I'm going to use the word alleging, that Paul here was injured during a break-in. But that's not what happened, and that's not what has been reported since then. Because Paul and the dude, DePape, were both in the house. The cops showed up. Paul answered the door and escorted them into DePape, and at that point, Paul got knocked over the head with a hammer. So that doesn't sound like a break-in. I want to see the footage of the incident. And the other part that they left out of this story is that both men, Paul and DePape, were both in their underwear and tighty whities, and there happened to be a hammer about. So that's all weird. Okay. They also came just before midterm elections when Republicans are favored to take control of the House. Wait, they also. The Nancy Pelosi was in Washington, D.C. at the time. They also come just before the midterm. Wow, this is good job, Michael. Okay. They also come just before the midterm elections when Republicans are favored to take control of the House, an outcome that would put an end to Pelosi's tenure as Speaker and raise questions as to whether the longtime leader of the House Democratic Caucus will retire. Not to mention that she will probably be investigated for her insider trading. And moving on. In 2018, Pelosi, 82, promised that she would give up the Speaker's gavel at the end of this term. But some Democrats think that she may retain her position if the party pulls out an upset and holds control of the lower chamber. Such a result would be a big surprise. Yeah. However, with Republicans widely... Let me read that. Such a result would be a big surprise, however, with Republicans widely favored to win the House. The Speaker herself has been mum about her future plans. Paul Pelosi was transported to a hospital following the October incident, where he underwent successful surgery to treat a skull fracture and serious injuries to his right arm and hands. How do we know that this skull fracture wasn't just a reopening of the wound from when he was drunk driving and in that other car accident thing? Right. So he was released from the hospital again, and this on Thursday, but remains under doctor's care as he continues to progress on a long recovery process and convalescence, according to a statement from the Speaker. On Friday, in her first on-camera remarks since the attack, the Nancy Pelosi. What is with this? The Nancy Pelosi said her husband will be well, noting, "It's going to be a long haul." In another clip of Pelosi's interview with CNN, the Speaker described the moment she learned about the attack. "I was sleeping in Washington, D.C. I had just gotten in the night before from San Francisco, and I hear the doorbell ring and think it's 5-something. I look up. I see it's 5. It must be the wrong apartment. No, it rings again, and then bang, 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 bang on the door," she told Cooper. That's called someone knocked on the door real loudly because you weren't answering the doorbell. "So I run to the door, and I was very scared. I see the Capitol Police, and they said, 'We have to come in to talk to you,'" she added. Which isn't true. They could have talked to her through the door, so shame on the police, or shame on lying Nancy. Pelosi said her children and grandchildren immediately came to mind, telling Cooper, "I never thought it would be Paul because, I knew he wouldn't be out and about, shall we say." What is that? Is that an entendre? Is that a double entendre? When Paul goes out and about, he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it without his hammer and his underwear and his tidy whities. And so they came in, she said, referring to the police. "At that time, we didn't even know where he was or what his condition was. We just knew there was an assault in our home." DePape faces a number of state and federal charges, including attempted murder and attempted kidnapping. He entered a not guilty plea for the state charges and faces between 13 years and life in prison for those felonies. They didn't mention that he was an illegal immigrant. But I guess it's just charges that arose from the attack and not other charges that should have been brought to him and should have happened to him. But either way, hey, good job, DePape. If for nothing else, you've had a lot of laughter too. We've all had a lot of laughs thanks to you. All right, that's it, everybody.